Okay, let's get started, and we will go through a quick set of slides, and then we'll talk about next steps. Welcome everyone. This is the Social Science Research Data Interest Group session. We hate we cannot be there in person. Actually, Steve sends his regrets. He 2 days ago contracted COVID. So it seems like COVID is a never-ending plague upon our work, it seems, and upon our lives. So he is still not feeling very well. So I spoke to him earlier. He's doing okay, but he's not feeling well. He will not be able to attend. So it'll just be me. I'll go through all the slides and we'll talk about next steps here. So a quick overview, and since we have such a small group, these times may be compressed, so we'll have plenty of time to have some discussion. We'll start off with a quick introduction and basically where we've been so far, what we've done, the things that we've talked about and things that we've not talked about, things that we thought were high priorities that we worked on, and things that other people picked up so we didn't do as much on. And then we'll have some questions and answers if you have any questions about that. And then we want to talk about new directions. Where should we go? Setting the scene for the future, looking at updating chairs. One thing to note, Ron Decker, who is listed as a co-chair here, he has stepped down from CESDA and also stepped down as a co-chair here. So we're definitely looking for new folks to help lead this group. So with that, let's move on to a quick introduction. I'm not sure how much everyone knows about the social science group, but we'll talk about it here. So it was, the whole idea behind this was Ron Decker at CESDA, myself here at the Odom Institute, but representing the International Federation of Data Organizations, and Steve McEachern from Australia representing the DDI Alliance, thought that these three organizations could use RDA to focus our efforts and create a social science group within RDA. It's something that RDA did not have at the time. So we held a initial birds of a feather in the RDA Botswana and talked about creating a social science and at that point humanities interest group, but eventually started focusing just on social sciences. The RDA approved the charter and was endorsed in 2019. We will talk a little bit more about next steps, but we started in 2019. All right. Let's see if I can, for some reason. Let me advance the slides here. We'll do it this way. So we focused on three themes when we started this interest group. Three core themes that we thought were important, and we discussed these in Botswana and Philadelphia. The first was quality of data and how to automate ways to investigate quality of metadata and the data themselves, and how we could start aligning with some of these FAIR principles and other principles and look at data quality within the social science research data realm. And also data policy, and try to come up with policy for sharing data and data policies that are implicit for making data available in the open science realm. Also, the third part was sensitive data. At that time, the estimates were over 40% of the data in the social science community was too sensitive to make them openly available without any restrictions or measures. That has changed since then. I believe there's lots of methodologies for that, but at the time there were a pretty large amount of the data that we were talking about that weren't able to be openly shared. So looking back across the history, it seems like it's been a long time, but COVID has really messed up my sense of time. We started back at Plenary 12, as I mentioned, with the birds of a feather. Then we had a provisional interest group meeting in Philadelphia for Plenary 13. And we met with some folks that were interested in the humanities as well. Plenary 14, we first met as a formal endorsed group in Helsinki. And we talked about connecting communities and data quality during that session. We had scheduled a session on sensitive data in Melbourne, Plenary 15, and a joint session on metadata requirements and data quality assessment during that Melbourne plenary, but that was canceled due to COVID. Then we had Plenary 16 in Costa Rica was a virtual one. We had no proposal for that one and did not have a meeting with the Plenary 16. Plenary 17 in Edinburgh, we had a joint meeting with a group that wanted to establish a sensitive data interest group. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, about how we work towards that. We had a plenary session in Plenary 18 that was virtual, focused on data quality. And of course, we're here today as a virtual session for the folks around the world and in Seoul. So start out with data policy. That was one of the three things we thought we were going to work on and touch base on. We did not make much progress on that so far, and largely in part because other groups within RDA, including in the social science, have started working on data policy, and we were focusing on sensitive data and data quality. But a few interest groups that we have participated in and worked with are the COVID-19 Social Science Working Group. Some of our members have participated there, as well as Fair Sharing and the Interest Group for Data Policy Standardization and Implementation. So those groups have members of the Social Science interest group within them. So we have not done a whole lot there, trying to prevent too much overlap, and overlap when we need to, but don't replicate things that are already in process. Sensitive data. This is an area, one of the three areas we're interested in addressing, and members of the Social Science Research Data Interest Group have contributed to the development of the new sensitive data interest group that is meeting. Steve, for example, is co-chairing some of those meetings there, helped with the charter development there. Unfortunately, Steve is, as I mentioned earlier, out sick today with COVID. He was going to talk a little more about the beginnings of that interest group, but it is its own establishment. It has its own endorsement. It's moving forward. We're very happy for that. Now we basically bring up regular topics for the social sciences within that agenda, and have kind of spun that off as something else that we have a kind of a monitoring role there, which is very, very exciting to see things move forward that we started thinking about early on. And that here's a few things. If those of you not familiar with the charter for the sensitive data interest group, it's understanding the different levels of the sensitivity of data and trying to design some sort of policies and governance to help manage that. It's not always about the technology. Sometimes it's about the governance and the policies around that. Also thinking about some protocols to be able to analyze, store, reuse the data, and whether those be things like differential privacy or emulation, those kinds of things, it's possible to share and reuse those data. Also working with the FAIR principles of formulating strategies to overcome barriers to utilizing and sharing this sensitive data. And often the challenge is how do you derive the maximum knowledge out of these data, because sometimes if you edit out components that are too sensitive to share, the data is then not as well able to be used for certain methodologies. So sometimes it's really hard. This group is working on ethical guidelines for sharing that and the reuse of it, and also exploring consent models, again, different governing types of primary and secondary uses, and how that we can look at the right types of informed consent to use across these types of data. So lots of work going on in that group, and some of our members are participating, and it's been a very successful first step. This is some of the work they're doing now, and there's actually some sessions currently going on about that. So talking about controlled vocabulary, looking at survey data, developing a sensitive data glossary activity, and also just looking at some collaborative community presentations around that. So you'll see those on the agenda at RDA 19. So the other area that we had talked about working towards and working on was data quality. And by data quality, we talk about not only the quality of the data itself for reproducibility, for example, but also talk about the quality of the metadata so it's reusable over time. Many archives and repositories are very interested in supporting data quality over time, and it's a very important component. And this has been a emphasis for our group for the Helsinki meeting as well as the 2021 meeting. So in Helsinki, we talked about a list of factors that impacted the quality of research. And we had a really good discussion where people brought up different ideas and things that have impact on that, and talked about different partners all around the world, repositories like ICPSR or the UK Data Archive or the Australian Data Archive that Steve represents, working together to come up with ways that we could promote the quality of social science research data as well, and promote the data quality for that. We had presentations from myself on curation for reproducibility. It's a Sloan-funded project where we are building tools to help manage the reproducibility workflows, where you take the actual article from the journal, you take the data and the code, run that on that as a third party outside the author's machine, and verify that you can reproduce the findings in the articles. So reproducible science from a third party doing that. And we're here at Odin, we're building some tools funded by Sloan to help with that workflow. And I'd love to talk more about that if someone's interested. Also talked to Ingrid Dilo about the fair's fair and how do you make data fair, and big efforts going on in Europe around that, as well as Ron Decker talked about the quality of metadata, the actual metadata, and how we can automate data quality and how we can manage data quality as well. This is some of the ideas that we talked about when we start quality assessment of metadata. A key part of that is the actual OEI reference model and the life cycle of data, and being able to ensure that these data and metadata reside in a trustworthy repository. Efforts like the Core Trust Seal, a trustworthy data repository certification method that came out of a RDA working group with the folks here at RDA, participated in that to merge the WDS, the data seal approval. That came the Core Trust Seal, which gives you a fairly lightweight but very detailed way to describe your repository as trustworthy. And there'll be another working, I think there's another interest group session or working group session. I think it's Thursday evening, my time. I think it would be Friday morning, maybe your time, on that as well, if you're interested. Also looking at the DDI data lifecycle, which is very similar to the research data lifecycle, and how you manage these metadata profiles within the catalogs and surveys as well. Also microdata registries, where these data are collected by outside administrative type data, and how we include that, and how you assess that quality of this administrated and these microdata on the outside. And Ron helped us with that as well. Our second meeting was trying to come up with a formal definition and conceptualization of what do we mean by metadata quality and data quality, and understanding the dimensions of that data quality, and looking to try to define a working group that would work across and within domains, because as you cross domains, it becomes much more difficult. And often we live in a multidisciplinary world where many domains participate in the same types of science and the same types of articles. At that virtual RDA plenary, the group, the Cure Fair working group, this RDA working group that's talking about data quality in the social science and reproducibility, gave a really good presentation. Again, more information from CESDA, Fairs Fair, and Ron Decker, and the quality of data was discussed during that as well. So that became a really strong focus, especially with the emphasis on how do we determine if data is fair and the quality of that data, and how do we put a metric on that quality of that data. So next steps at that last meeting, a few things were brought up. One is putting together a conceptual paper defining the data and metadata quality, thinking about the dimensions of data. What types of dimensions should it have, and how we could create a working group that put together this definition of data and metadata quality, the dimensionality of it, and how data quality within and across domains can work together. And that was the latest update on that. That working group has not got formed yet, but that was some of the discussion there. So that's a little bit of the history on where we came from and the types of discussions we have been having. I'd like to take a moment to stop and just see if we have any questions from where we came from and what's going on. And since we're a small group, if everyone would like to, we also can introduce ourselves and talk about it. I didn't give a formal introduction to myself. I am Jonathan Crabtree. I'm with here, the Odom Institute at UNC Chapel Hill. I manage the Research Data Information Systems group here. My work is in trusted archives and repositories. I'm also right now currently the director of the board for CoreTrust Seal, as well as help lead the Dataverse, the Global Dataverse Community Consortium, as well as work with the IFDU with Steve McEachern. So I work in a lot of these agencies and groups that are looking to have collaborations, international collaborations, to build and manage systems for transparency, for research data, and trusted repositories. So that's where I come from. Do we want to, anyone want to go first and give a quick update on who you are and where you come from? Everyone's so shy.
I'll say hi. I don't know if you can see me.
Yes, I can see you, Kira. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. I'm from Cambridge University Press. I'm interested in this because something like 2/3 of our journal portfolio are in humanities and social sciences.
Yes.
And so looking at our journal portfolio and what kind of policies they can implement about, better data sharing, or even in areas where what they call, what sort of research materials they have, they don't even call data, is interesting to me.
Right.
So yeah,
absolutely. And the definition of data and what is data varies so widely across that as well.
Yeah. So I've sort of been actually trying to avoid using the word data a lot with some of the social sciences journals, because they just switch off and, talking about research transparency rather than sharing data. But yes. All these questions about sort of the quality of social sciences data and what you even call data are, interesting to me for that reason.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good to have you.
Thanks. I don't know why I'm a co-host, but I seem to be a co-host.
I think everyone's a co-host.
Oh, okay. Thanks for running this for such a small group of us.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Anyone else interested? Delphine, Louis? So if no questions, this may be a very quick session because the rest of the session is discussion and almost all discussion. So the thing we wanted to talk about is where to next. We technically, this group's been around now for 3 years, although interrupted, and it has been up and down. There has been progress made, two of for sure, the third by other groups, most of it in the data policy that's driven by RDA in general and all the other groups. But sensitive data, we have a interest group, a dedicated interest group now for that. Data quality, that there's leading to a conceptual paper that people are working on. But where do we go next? How do we move forward? We are thinking about what next steps do we need to take for this community. And with this small group, it might be hard to get the feeling of that, but it would be nice to understand where people would like to see things go, and what new areas are up for consideration and what thematic areas should we think about and move toward. That's a question that we have for the community. The idea behind this session was, let's talk about what we've done, the things we've been successful at, and think about what the next steps are. And I'd love to hear from anyone that has any idea on next steps or where we should go for those things. In addition, Ron Decker, for example, has concluded his term at CESDA and stepped down. And Steve, who would love to have been here today, he has COVID, so he is out today. But Steve and I feel like I think it's time to start looking at someone else to try to find new co-chairs. So not only are we looking at his next step, we're looking at who can help lead us into the next steps and next things to do. So we'd love to have more information from people about what they want to see us do as a group. What should we go and if anyone has any ideas, and feel free to volunteer someone else. If you think someone else should be here leading the group, we'd be happy to contact them and say, hey, someone said that you would be good at doing this. So we're happy to address that as well. But I have a handful of slides that have things like their charter and the group page and links and things like that, and also some organizational links. But really and truly, what we wanted to do is have a discussion around what the next steps are and what we're going to do and where we're going to go. So, unfortunately, we're such a small group now. There's just a handful of us here. So I'd be happy to hear any comments or any thoughts. Maybe you joined this session thinking you would see A, B, and C and didn't see it. What did you expect, or what did we leave out, or what do you think we should do next? So I'd like to open the floor to anyone else who would like to give us any direction.
I mean, I can say I was mostly sort of listening in to see what other people might think. So I don't know that I have any strong ideas about where the direction should go next. But yeah.
Yeah, and this is a very, very tough time. Here it is, 8 p.m. In the Eastern U.S., 2 a.m. in Europe, and I guess 9 a.m. After a long week in South Korea. So it's not a great time to get a bunch of people to talk about things.
Yeah. Yeah. This is the repeat session, right? Was there anything that came out of the first session that was particularly?
So we had to cancel the first session because Steve was sick with COVID, and they couldn't get my account on Hoover working. I was logged in and it kept saying that I couldn't get in. So I couldn't do the presentation. And Steve had COVID and was too sick to even join. So we ended up canceling that session, which was earlier this morning, I guess 1 a.m. my time. So I don't know what time that would have been everybody else's time.
Yeah. I don't know. For some reason, I had this in my calendar as virtual only. I'm actually in South Korea, so I was just.
Oh, are you? Yeah, it actually is virtual only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to be hybrid. Both sessions were supposed to be hybrid, and Steve and I both were going to be there. But with Steve being sick, and they shut down the travel for us here, so I couldn't go. So that we had travel issues as far as COVID-related travel issues. So we had to shift from hybrid to strictly virtual because of that. Yeah. So I'm very envious. I was hoping to be there. I would love to be there myself.
Yeah, sorry you couldn't make it, and sorry about Steve. I got COVID 2 weeks ago myself and recovered just in time to make it. So
yes, I had COVID back in, I guess, February is when I had it, but I think everyone eventually is going to get it. Hopefully everyone has their shots and their boosters, so it's not so bad. But it wasn't awful for me, but yeah, I know some people it's really bad for.
Just trying to think of ideas. I mean, yeah, maybe that question about how you find data and what sort of things should be considered data in social sciences, maybe some sort of like even advocacy or communications with people in fields that don't typically consider themselves as having data.
Yeah. So one thing that typically comes up is what is data, especially in research data world, has morphed because in many cases you not only need the data, but you need the software, you need the workflows, you need the routines. So now, as far as data quality, in order to really test the quality of the data, you might need some custom software, which is some custom R routines or Stata routines in the case of statistical data. But quite often it is not just the data and it's not just the code, it's the software, and that may reside in a GitHub repository somewhere, right? It may not be accessible, or it could be openly accessible and people change it. It's not versioned very well and you would never get it to work again with that data. So it's a huge challenge when you start thinking about all the potential things that could be considered data and how to communicate that to your constituents.
Yeah, I think that question of what's needed around the data to ensure quality is, yeah, also a really interesting one. Yeah. The code and data, and I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything.
I had recently, I had someone who had a publisher contact them and talk about their data policies. And while they had publicly placed their metadata and information on how to get the data on a public repository, they had kept the data itself, which was over 7 terabytes of data for this particular data set, was in a Google store up in the cloud, where it was not in a registered archive. It was in a personal cloud somewhere and didn't qualify for their data quality. So then you have a challenge of how do you move that data in a large data set, and how, most repositories have a challenge in accepting those as well. So when you start talking about the size of these data, especially when the quality of the metadata is not in question anymore, but you can't get to the data or the code. So it's more than just the metadata, although a lot of times we say metadata is the most important, but now we're in a world where all of it's real critical these days.
Yeah, a lot of massive data sets like that, a particular challenge in social science. Is that particularly common in social science?
No, it's not. And that's the challenge is as you move into more and more things like network analysis and the more innovative social science analysis issues and administrative data as well, you start getting into the sensitive and large data, and that makes it a little more cumbersome for the average archive. Yeah.
So maybe it's a matter of, because I mean, I know a lot of these questions about, large data sets and things are being, well, as you say, sensitive data is already embedded in other groups in RDA now. So maybe it's a matter of, trying to connect social scientists with those people who have already discussed these things or already working on these things on the STEM side of things.
And I think it's also would be a symbiotic thing, because quite often on the STEM sides of things, they are missing some of the things that the social science folks do very, very well. So I think that collaboration across these multidisciplinary groups would be important.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I guess I don't want to keep everyone if we don't have anything else to discuss. I'm happy to give you back some time because I'm sure you got a busy day today.
Yeah, I think Hillary mentioned in the beginning the next session starts right on the tail end of this one. So
yes, yeah. She asked if we could end just a few minutes early. Anyhow, this is a little bit earlier than we were going to end, but at least it would give everyone time to get to the next session. And I do regret not being there, and I do appreciate everyone showing up for this, or I guess early morning there.
Yeah, no, thank you for presenting and sharing this. Yeah.
Oh, no worries. So just in case, here's a step. Of course, the slides will get shared, but if anyone would like to follow up, send Steve or I an email. Of course, we readily take volunteers for participation in the group, as usual. But if you would like, give me a quick email, and I'd be happy to communicate with everyone later. But I really appreciate it. Thanks for showing up. And if you know anybody that's interested in our group, let them know. With that, I will bid everyone good morning over there and good evening, I guess, here and middle of the night for Europe. So y'all have a good day. Thank you.